All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Millennials Are Old podcast. And you know what, Brian? I've been thinking, right? We are now 3 films into our Richard Linklater series, right? And I thought to myself, of course, our first movie was Before Sunrise, which was the most romantic, beautiful film ever made. The second film was maybe the most hot couch guy thing we've reviewed in a while. So how about
Yeah.
let's find an incredibly emotionally satisfying movie that features an amazing hot couch guy. And it turns out, Brian, there is a Richard Linklater movie that fits that description perfectly.
Yeah, it's almost like that's like a sort of archetype floating in the ether for Gen Xers and older millennials. Almost like it's like, deep in the back of our heads, like some sort of like Carl Jung specter that Linklater just keeps, ginning up for us.
Exactly. And it's a movie about a boy growing up in the exact same time frame that we did. And it turns out that boy was basically us the entire time. I think we can both describe it that way.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing a movie that is so relatively recent that explicitly takes place in the time it does. I did know coming in that that was when it took place, but I was surprised by kind of, I think, how central Linklater makes that to the movie.
No, absolutely. So, without further ado, this week we are going to be reviewing the classic Richard Linklater movie, Boyhood. But before we get into our review this week, Brian, let's bring back our segment, Cringe Generational, Cringe Millennial Moment of the Week.
Generational millennial moment of the week, cringe generational moment of the week.
Woo! Yeah! All right, and I was going to do something that was very gross and was not something that was, going to be honest, very pleasant to talk about for our Cringe Generational segment. But as I was gearing up to send you the Zoom link, literally probably 10 minutes before we started recording, I found an article, Brian, that I really want to talk about that has honestly very little to do with millennials, but it is cringe on the police's part. So, this week I want to talk about an article that has been going around, but I just found the first one I could find. But it's related to our favorite Italian-American hero, Luigi Mangione.
Is he all right? What'd they do to our boy?
Well, they're trying to fuck him over once again. Unsurprising, I know. But the article I found is, the header is, Luigi Mangione's lawyer claims cops illegally collected DNA by giving him snack after McDonald's arrest. Which is not surprising at all, unfortunately. So they fucked him over on that, obviously.
I mean, I'm just surprised he had room for the snack. He had just eaten McDonald's, He seems pretty fit, so it's just surprising that he would, that's neither here nor there, but
His delicious meal of a single hash brown. That was probably like $7 given McDonald's prices.
Yeah, because he was in, what was it, in upstate New York, right?
No, he was in Altoona. Or he could have had
That's right,
Altoona-style pizza.
He was in Altoona.
Imagine if he had Altoona-style pizza, maybe.
That would be so amazing.
Imagine him getting caught and there's like the fucking police cam video of him like just eating that fucking slice
just
with
looking
like the barely
just
melted
looking
cheese on it.
unhappy. Just like footage of Luigi just like scowling as he continues to eat this pizza for some reason.
And you just hear him whisper under his breath as the cops come up like, why the fuck is there salami on this? What the fuck?
What? God, I feel like I'm gonna fucking get sick.
Honestly, maybe we should do a cringe generational segment on the Altoona style pizza someday too, because that is cringe as fuck, honestly.
I assume that someday we're going to eat a slice of it for the show. I bet there's some weird fucking bourgeois place in Portland that makes like Altoona style pizza for like $15 a pop.
Oh, it has to. There has to be that. But anyways, body of the article, and we're not going to go over the whole thing because a lot of it's just recapping of the stuff we already know. But there's a couple paragraphs that are relevant to this recent news update. So, Luigi Mangione, the alleged shooter of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, had his rights violated by Altoona police when they confronted him while at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania, his lawyers claim. Of course, we already knew that. In a recent court filing, Mangione's lawyer, Thomas Dickey, argued that police had no objective grounds to detain the University of Pennsylvania graduate other than a hunch and or unparticularized suspicion, which is objectively true too. Officers responded to the McDonald's after receiving a 911 call about suspicious mail, blah, blah, blah. And of course, we talked about his, was a Fifth Amendment violation on last week's episode, I believe, where they didn't Mirandize him for the first 17 minutes, but that's also neither here nor there. But the paragraph here is, after his arrest, officers allegedly provided Mangione with a snack so they could obtain a DNA sample, according to his attorney, and that any DNA samples are quote-unquote poisonous fruits and shouldn't be allowed as part of the evidence, which I do agree to. I don't think that police should be allowed to get DNA DNA evidence from somebody without their consent. I think that
Yeah,
is
no, of
pretty
course not.
unconscionable. Although that is allegedly how they got the guy who's most likely responsible for most of the Long Island serial killings. I think his name's Rex Heuermann. They like fucking got a DNA sample from a
Yeah.
like discarded pizza slice. But this is a thing that they've been doing recently is they'll go through like garbage or,
Yeah, that's insane. That's an insane right to give up. One of the most weirdly intimate things that you can go through that belong to a person are their garbage. It's actually like a running joke. Like the idea that going through someone's garbage or, can be surprisingly intimate. And someone's DNA is their life being.
Yeah, no, it's fucking ridiculous. So obviously the police in this situation are cringe. Of course they were cringe from the very beginning. Like, remember when Luigi first got arrested and that cop went on TV and he was like, you know what, I felt like I did good. I felt like I got a sicko behind bars. It's like all you did was confront a scrawny guy in a McDonald's.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. A guy that posed no threat to you.
yeah, so Altoona as a city seems like a fucking nightmare. And even though we will eventually go to Altoona to try the Altoona style pizza, I'm not going to be happy about it because it seems like a shithole city, I'm going to be honest.
Doesn't it have like a big
Oh,
Doesn't it have like a
absolutely.
big fentanyl problem too? I mean, I know like everywhere in the Midwest does. I'm not trying to pick on Altoona for that, but isn't it like kind of a burnt out one of those towns?
Oh, absolutely. Basically everywhere in Western Pennsylvania, basically all of Ohio, especially Southern Ohio and like Kentucky, West Virginia, those are all like, it's like the Fent heartland. Like, seriously.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad there's some kind of industry thriving down there.
Yeah, it's the shitty pizza and Fent industry. And the class trader industry, too, in Altoona seems like to be doing pretty well over there, too.
Well, I mean, like the cops already, that's what they signed up for. So being able to get someone like Luigi, that's like a plus for them. That's like a nice little bonus. That's like everything that they sign up to be a cop for manifest. The ability to arrest and detain and deny the rights of like a scrawny guy who doesn't really pose any risk to them and who they don't really know did anything. He does give them an opportunity to just do everything they've ever wanted to do as cops.
No, absolutely. And Brian, speaking of class traders just subjugating a scrawny young guy, I think it leads perfectly into Boyhood. So once again, we are going to be reviewing Boyhood this week. It came out in 2014. And the first trivia fact I had here is the film was shot over 45 days from May 2002 to August 2013, which, roughly speaking, is more than 4,000 actual days of in time, which is crazy to me because this movie is almost 3 hours long, and it only took 45 days to film something that took 11 or 12 years to 11 and a half years to shoot, which is crazy to think about.
So that's crazy. The other thing, when you know, and yeah, I mean, how do you not know? It's evident on the screen. When you consider the way in which this film was made, how consistent it feels throughout is pretty remarkable. You don't consider the circumstance by which it was made when you're watching it, which in itself is kind of crazy.
No, absolutely. It's one of those things where, we as kids, of course, watched fucking sitcoms on TV or whatever, and we got to see, kids our age and a little older and a little younger grow up in front of our eyes, right? But that took years. They did this in like 3 hours. It's genuinely a technical masterpiece, this movie is. And this movie was rated R, of course. There's a lot of swearing in this film. There's a lot of F-bombs. Although there is actually a little bit of turmoil going on in about the first third of the movie. But otherwise than that, it's pretty much all swearing. That's the reason why it's rated R. There's no scenes where fucking Ethan Hawke is just like busting a cap in people's heads or whatever. Or he could have did that to some McCain supporters. Never mind. We'll wait till we get to that point. But anyways, so once again, this movie was directed by Richard Linklater. It was written by him as well. And the next trivia fact I had here is the film began production as the untitled 12-year project and eventually just became known as 12 Years. But when the film was finished, Richard Linklater changed the title to Boyhood to avoid confusion with 12 Years a Slave, which first off, I don't know if that's true, but just imagine like you're going into the movie theater around the same time and you're like, oh God, I'm ready to watch that 12 Years movie. And then you just see 12 Years a Slave and you're like, wow, I was not expecting Richard Linklater to go this hard.
Yeah, Linklater really took a swing.
Although, to be fair, Brian, that movie, of course, was directed by Steve McQueen, who we have covered on an earlier episode. So I guess both those movies have come together on our show.
Yeah, Steve McQueen of The Blob and Bullet, The Getaway.
Which is hilarious. We both made that joke on that episode, too. Which
you have to. You have to.
And the movie was produced by Richard Linklater, Kathleen Sutherland, John Searing, and John Sloss. And of course, we covered Richard Linklater's movies on previous episodes, just listen to those. And Catherine Sutherland is a producer known really only for producing this film, as well as Jonathan Searing, but he also produced such movies as Monsoon Wedding, The South Bank Show, and Me and You and Everyone We Know, which I looked these up. They're all like kind of twee indie films. I didn't have any interest in looking into them, but I had to put that in there.
That doesn't really sound like my scene.
No. Well, speaking of things that aren't your scene either, but, John Sloss produced this film and Green Book, which is another critically acclaimed film that I found out a lot of people hate.
Green Book, have you seen Green Book?
I'm familiar with the story.
So I know you already know all this stuff about it, but when you see it, it is like watching like a Mr. Show sketch. Or it's like the Bob and David sketch that's like Better Roots, if you're familiar with that sketch. It's like that, but for real.
Okay, that's totally fair. I know exactly what you mean. And then, of course, you mentioned the movie's length. So this movie is approximately 165 minutes long. And the next trivia fact I had here is each year of our main character Mason's life is covered in an average of about 14 minutes of screen time, which is once again crazy because it feels so seamless. You see this kid who starts at like 6 and ends up 18, and you're like, damn, it's like time literally just flew fucking by. It's crazy.
Well, it's not just the technical marvel of the movie being made and working. It's the amount of confidence and faith in your performers and the level of talent for them all to show up consistently over that period of time. You cast, for instance, our protagonist as a little kid. You don't really know what he's going to be like when he's fucking 14,
Yeah, he could just be a complete fucking moody dickhead, which we will get into that later.
Oh, I just mean though, in terms of like, will he be able to like do it at that point? You know what I mean?
Oh, that's true. That is a good point.
Will he be able to act? Will he even have that in him anymore? You don't know. So Linklater and, his casting director and whoever had to find these performers and make that judgment, which doesn't normally go into the equation when you're making a film,
No, absolutely. And this film had a budget of about $4 million and it grossed $57.3 million, which is also crazy that this movie only cost $4 million because both Patricia Arquette and Ethan Hawke were once again in on this movie for 11 and a half years. They're not that cheap. Okay, they're both like pretty prominent actors.
Yeah.
So, but I think I was reading that Ethan Hawke did this to Richard Linklater basically as a favor, essentially. And I'm assuming I think it was Patricia Arquette did this in between filming of other things, if I'm not mistaken. But either way, both very critically acclaimed and high-grossing actors were in this movie, and they still got it for $4 million. It's crazy to think about.
Well, it seems like, Linklater, he shot very quickly, like when they would figure out what periods they were shooting through. So it wasn't like, if, for instance, Arquette had to work around other films, which obviously she did because it was over the course of fucking 12 years. It was probably, a week here and there. So Patricia Arquette still acts. She's not like doing as much as she would have been. It probably wasn't that hard for them to work that 1 week around their schedules, to be honest.
No, that's totally fair. I
mean, it is impressive that they did it, but
it's still like one of those SAG things, when we talked about, I think it was Cop, the James Woods movie where they talked about working for scale. That almost would have had to be like a working for scale thing, almost.
Yeah.
If they're both SAG members, which I'm assuming they probably both are.
Cop being a SAG movie is so fucking funny.
It is, though. And then on Rotten Tomatoes, this movie has a 97% critic score and an 80% audience score. And next trivia fact I had here is Boyhood is one of only 11 movies to receive a perfect 100 on Metacritic. And so far, the only film to receive this score upon its original release. So needless to say, this is an extremely critically acclaimed film. And in fact, it was nominated for, I believe, 6 Academy Awards, but the only one it won was for Patricia Arquette's. And we will get into Patricia Arquette because her arc in this movie is devastating and emotionally resonant. Like once again, we'll get it at the near the end, but one of the last scenes in this movie with Patricia Arquette legitimately made me cry when I first watched it. It hit very close to home, I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, and I think probably most people watching this movie had that experience. The thing when you're talking about this movie being so well received is, and I've been pretty open in our previous episodes about my kind of love-hate relationship with Linklater. This movie, though, it is so successful in what it's setting out to do. What it's attempting to do is so ambitious, and it does it so seamlessly, and just on a technical level, it is so successful that even if it had all the Linklaterisms that turn me off, which it doesn't, but that's neither here nor there for this point. Even if it had all of those younger Linklaterisms that he seems to have kind of refined that drive me crazy in his older work, it still would be impossible for me to say this is a bad film because it is so successful at on a technical level at doing this wildly ambitious thing. The fact that it is emotionally resonant and it doesn't really feel hokey on top of that is pretty incredible.
No, abso-fucking-lutely. I 100% agree with that. And, speaking of, we're talking about the plot here, let's get into the synopsis. Now, I'm not going to go super in-depth with the synopsis because there's just kind of a series of events that happen, but I do want to obviously mention a little bit of the actual events here. So, the movie begins in 2002. 6-year-old Mason Evans, played by Eller Coltrane, lives with his divorced mother, Olivia, played by Patricia Arquette. And, once again, of course, she was the one that won the Academy Award for this performance. And next story fact I had here is Richard Linklater has said that due to the fact that Patricia Arquette had been a mom at a very young age, she was the only actress he ever thought for the part of Olivia, which is interesting too because if you think about it, Brian, do you think that maybe Patricia Arquette's character in this movie was the same Patricia Arquette character in True Romance, if you think about it? Because there's a little kid at the end of that movie, and of course we don't see Christian Slater in this movie, but maybe he died or left or something.
We presume that Clarence dies, and the protagonist of Boyhood is actually Elvis from the ending of True Romance, yes.
There is definitely a lot of scenes in this movie where it's like, hey, baby mama, how you doing?
Yeah, he talks just like that. That was just a weird phase that the actor was going through when he was in middle school. Linklater kept telling him to stop doing the voice, and he was like, whoa, man.
Hey, man, stop killing my style.
They're like, all right, this is just a thing he's going through. We have to deal with it. It's a weird 40 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, it is. And also, his 8-year-old sister, Samantha, played by Lorelai Linklater, who is actually Richard Linklater's daughter in real life. And the next story fact I had here is apparently Lorelai Linklater wanted to be killed off about 3 to 4 years within production, but he convinced her not to go along with it because apparently she had lost her, enthusiasm about halfway through.
One of the things I'm getting at when I talk about the level of faith in casting these very young actors for such an ambitious long-term project is and kudos to them too, because this, you don't know if you're going to want to make a movie. When you become an actor, presumably you don't assume that you're going to be doing something, making the same movie for 6 years. And she probably had to live with it a bit more than the other actors in the quote-unquote off season because her fucking dad was the creator of the premise,
No, fucking exactly. But
she's great in it. She's great.
Oh, yeah, she's great. Absolutely. So they're having some financial issues. They eventually have to leave their small little house for a different, better apartment living situation in another town so the mom can go to school. Eventually, we meet Mason's father, played by Ethan Hawke, who I know we made the joke earlier, but he is a literal character that I made a bit about in an earlier episode. He is a hot couch based lib guy. It's awesome. He's so cool in this movie.
He is. So for me, and probably for you too, Taylor, this wasn't so much a parental figure for me. And we are a little bit older than the kids in this movie would be, in 2002. But this is kind of like your brother or your brother's friend or kind of a weird guy. Like when you're in 9th grade, he's just graduated high school and he's still hanging around your hometown. That's kind of the vibe that Ethan Hawke gives for me when we first meet him in this movie.
Yes.
Kind
of
essentially deadbeat dad with a heart of gold, I guess.
Yes, exactly. Good way to put it. He's a deadbeat dad with a heart of gold who, through his own fucked upness and dirtbaggedness, is still trying to essentially be a good person. He's going through odd jobs, trying to get money here and there. He's trying to make his art fucking musician thing work, but it's clearly not working out. He and his, ex-wife now aren't getting along very well. There's obviously some strife there. But he's inherently a good person, but he just doesn't have the tools quite yet to get his shit together. And of course, it was because he had 2 kids when he was very young. I think both of his kids were already born when he was 23 or some shit. That's young as fuck.
That's the thing that you kind of grapple with, I guess, as we are millennials who are getting older. And I think for just most people, in our life situation, regardless of age, you kind of get older and you think about some of the stuff that your parents fucked up and some of the stuff that maybe you didn't give a lot of grace to when you were a kid. And you think they were in kind of a tough spot. They had a lot of shit that they had to deal with that I maybe didn't think about, till I was in my late 20s or early 30s, And to me,
absolutely.
That's kind of what this character. And neither of my parents, my mom was a base lib, but she wasn't quite as young as Ethan Hawke is when we meet him. She was about 30 by the time I was born. But that's what this character kind of invokes to me, because you do see him fuck up with the kids when they're really small. He does things like So the thing that kind of hurts my heart early on that I want to call out is when the kids ask him, he's seeing them for the first time in a while. He's in town from Alaska. And they say, "Are you and mom going to get back together?" And instead of saying, "Well, no," he says, because that's what he's hoping will happen. He says, "Well, I don't know. Maybe that's not entirely up to me," which is not the appropriate thing to say to your children who are going through a divorce.
No, 100%. Yeah,
And you're like, oof. But he's genuinely saying that because it's this immature, emotional. He's thinking, well, I don't know. Maybe we could be a family again. But you, as the audience, know that that's like the worst thing to say to a small child whose family's been separated.
No, 100%. Yeah. But yeah, there's so many scenes of him later on in the movie where he talks shit about fucking George Bush. It's hilarious. He steals signs from John McCain. It's awesome.
It's awesome.
I love it.
It's like, I guess I was thinking watching this, and I don't think this is the case because there's slightly different types of guys, but this is maybe the type of guy that our protagonist from Suburbia, when I'm thinking about the Linklater extended universe, you could see the Suburbia protagonist growing into a guy that's not entirely dissimilar to this if he dealt with some of his hangups.
Yes, I can definitely see that too.
Obviously, they're very different characters in a lot of ways. But Linklater, you see throughout his career these themes and these characters and archetypes that he's been grappling with. And for me, Boyhood is the latest Linklater film I've seen. For me, though, this movie, but Ethan Hawke's character in particular, are like the realization of this image kind of himself that Linklater's been grappling with, of like kind of his foibles and who he wants to be. And I think Ethan Hawke, he plays the same character in the before film. That's clearly Linklater, right? To some extent.
Oh, absolutely, yes. And in fact, I know I made the joke about Patricia Arquette. Maybe Ethan Hawke's character in this is the same one from Before Sunrise if there were no sequels.
Well,
maybe.
So that is a thought that I had watching this, because that almost, I don't know, I like his character in this so much more than the Before movies, but I had that same thought, actually.
Even though I love Before Sunrise, I still agree with that, Brian. I want to be very clear. He is awesome in this movie.
Well, but the reason that this character is cool, and this is taking away my personal feelings about Before Sunrise, Linklater is writing this character from an older perspective. He's older now than he was when he wrote that film. And so he's bringing more, I think, to this character. He's looking backwards at like a younger version of himself. And he's able to kind of recognize things in that version of himself, right? That maybe he was closer to in the Before movies, or in Suburbia.
No, absolutely. And then, so some other events happen. Eventually, Olivia meets a guy named Bill. They get married. It's a very tumultuous marriage. Of course, it starts off well. It's one of those things where, and I'm just going to be real here. I grew up in a house with domestic violence and child abuse. I'm just going to be honest, I did. And this type of guy that Bill is the same type of motherfucker my dad was. So watching the scenes of him progressively getting worse and more abusive and more alcoholic were really hard to watch, I'm going to be honest. I didn't have trauma or panic attacks on it or anything, but I saw it, and I saw him acting very superficially charmful to her at the beginning, and I thought to myself, oh, he's going to be abusive. And a lot of people have had criticisms with this movie in general because they say nothing really happens, blah blah blah. It's a movie where nothing happens. But I can tell you what, this is once again a movie about a boy and a girl, of course, too, who grow up 12 years in this time frame, and a lot of shit happens to them in this. It's not like fucking, once again, a Michael Bay fucking movie or something, but a lot of shit happens, and this type of traumatic incident that you eventually kind of have to move on from and heal from and stuff like that, that's a deeply powerful thing. And it's not like a fucking Lifetime movie or whatever, sappy type shit like that, but it's like a pretty real and I would say understated portrayal of domestic violence and child abuse.
They did a great job on it. I had pretty strong feelings. So I am fortunate enough to have not grown up in a household like this, but I remember having a few close friends with parents that were very much like this, where you'd see the escalation, right? You'd see them start drinking throughout the day, and their charm would kind of morph into snipes, and it would escalate into them coming into your friend's room and screaming at your friend in front of you, and then switching gears and kind of trying to joke with you, but they're being really scary. I think this whole, I guess, arc of the film, the escalation in it's really well done, because the thing, you kind of alluded to, Taylor, you recognize it on the outside, but it's also outwardly this guy, right? So he presents everything to them as has a family that Ethan Hawke's character doesn't have, right? He's got this stability and this kind of professionalism and this like maturity, you know, and like simmering underneath it is just this kind of like directionless fury that comes out as he gets more comfortable as, I guess, the head of the household. And as far as the criticism of nothing happening in this, do people really say that? Because that's a pretty stupid thing to say.
I remember Red Letter Media said that specifically. They said it's a movie where nothing happens, and I don't agree with that at all. I think a lot of shit happens in this movie.
No, yeah, I have to disagree with that. And first of all, it's understated and it's fairly realistic. It's not like a dull movie. It's actually, there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of tension. I feel like the central point of this movie, probably the reason it's called Boyhood, although I actually think, despite that title, I actually think that his sister is given almost as much characterization as he is. But it's kind of about all of those things that you observe in your childhood and adolescence, all of those things that like make up the tapestry of you, that maybe you don't think about, but they stick with you, you know? And that's what we're seeing, is we see all of these things that our protagonist has been through as a kid and as a teenager, and kind of, you know, when we get there, we see how that makes him kind of his own man, so to speak.
No, absolutely, yeah. So, and of course, just because of my personal feelings, I won't expound upon the abusive scenes. But eventually, Olivia and the kids, they leave. You know, things become more stable once they're out of that situation. We never actually get to see Bill's kids again, which I heard is also another point of criticism in this movie.
Well, no, that's what would happen.
No, and honestly, though, Brian, that is what happened. I was in that situation growing up where my dad would just date these women and just fucking emotionally manipulate them. And to be clear, when I said DV, it wasn't towards my mom. It was towards my dad's other girlfriends. So that's what I was talking about. Like, but that was what happened. Like, he would just date these women with kids, and then I would never see them again. And that probably happened like 10 times because they got sick of his shit, basically. So, and people were like, oh, why aren't they? And it's like, you guys clearly didn't grow up in that situation. Well, so I don't know why you keep talking about it like that. It's just crazy to me.
But I mean, it's also, because again, I didn't grow up in that situation. That is clear. Why would they see those kids again? It's unfortunate, and they reckon with that in the film. There's a whole scene where they discuss it. But the realistic thing is, I mean, her kids ask her why they couldn't take them, and she says they're his kids. What was I supposed to do? Kidnap them? That's the reality. When would they see them again or hear from them again? Maybe they would when everyone got older, but probably not, because why would they? It sucks. It's upsetting. It's an upsetting scene in the film, and it's an upsetting reality for anyone in that situation. But I don't understand why people would criticize the film for that. Maybe they should criticize, I don't know, maybe they should criticize the reality in which we live.
Yes, exactly right. But yeah,
I started to say that, and then I felt like I was being like a Tumblr person, and then I had to finish the thought.
No, it's okay. But yeah, so eventually the years keep going on. Of course, we talked about the scene where the kids and Mason Sr. steal the McCain signs, which is hilarious. There's also a scene where Mason Sr. talks to Lorelai Linklatter's character, and it's just like, well, you got to wear protection because what happened to Sarah Palin's kid?
He's so cool.
He got knocked up. Yeah.
He's so cool. So this is a conversation that my mother had. This really uncomfortable sex talk where your mom is like, no, we're going to have this talk. We're going to be really cool about it. And you're like, oh my God. No, I understand that the emotional core to this movie is supposed to be the kids. And it absolutely is. I love Ethan Hawke in this film. This guy is so fucking cool.
He's such a cool guy.
He's like an aspirational figure for me.
Yeah. I also love the scene where he comes home or he brings the kids back to like his place for the weekend or whatever, and he's like hanging out with his like band buddy, and they're watching Hostel. They're watching Hostel on the TV.
He's like 30 years old, right? And he has a roommate, and they watch Hostel together, and he's like, can we turn that off?
Yeah, turn that shit off. My kids are over. I love the idea of watching a torture porn movie, and like your roommate's kids come over, and he's like, oh shit, my roommate's kids are here. Let me turn off
because I mean, like, I'm lucky enough to have never had a roommate who had kids, but you can see how that would be like, you'd be like, oh, your kids are here. Oh, that's right. I guess I can't watch fucking video violence.
I just love the idea of like, yeah, once again, your roommate's kids come over and your roommate's like, turn Hostel off and I want to see the fucking Obama-McCain debate. Turn that shit on right now. I love that. It's so cool. And also the scene where they steal the McCain signs, there's a lady and she's like, I just love Obama. I just have dreams about kissing him and loving him. And I think like, wait, Larry St. Clair is in drag in this movie? Okay, that's a bad reference.
So actually, that character reminds me of the classic, the Mayor Pete calves cramping tweet. Was that Mayor Pete
yes.
that's about?
Yep. Yep, that's Mayor Pete. That's Mayo Pete. Oh god, that's amazing. But yeah, so eventually we meet some other characters. We meet Mason's grandparents who, and this is another thing I know we've all had an experience of. A relative that we don't really see very often, but they show up for some celebration or whatever, and they give us a wildly inappropriate, not offensive, but a wildly inappropriate gift for us. So they give him like a Bible with his name on it and a shotgun, which like Mason is not that kind of kid. He's not that kind of kid.
But Linklater gives us an idealized version of this, and maybe this was his experience in that it's his grandparents, right?
His paternal
grandparents, and so he's like, it's a whole conversation they have about gun safety, and like they give him shooting lessons and things, and it's very dignified, which to me is like a coding. Like maybe this is me being inclined to read this to it. It's because they're a base Slim family, so they're not like these anti-gun like pussies, right? They're like, well, we're gonna give you this fucking shotgun, and we're gonna teach you how to use it and how to wield this power responsibly. And you see like Mason, getting a shot when are they throwing like clay jars in the air or something to practice?
Yeah, something
shooting?
Like that. Yeah.
And him shooting one of them, and like the feeling of satisfaction. Because I'm going to tell you, I had a dad that wanted to give me guns. At the time, I was like, this is stupid. And in retrospect, I'm like, I should have let him teach me how to shoot. That'd have been fucking cool.
Yeah. But, and I also totally missed this one, but also Olivia, she gets into a relationship with a younger, I almost said Vietnam, Jesus Christ. I keep forgetting this is an hour time frame,
the same
basically.
Distance of time.
Yeah, right. But an Iraq War veteran who later becomes a correctional officer, he's also an alcoholic. She seems to find marriages with alcoholics, which we will talk about it at the very end of this movie because there is certainly an archetype. Oh, and also she gets her degree. She gets a master's degree. She's like a psychology instructor or teacher or something along those lines. I can't remember exactly what her title is, but she eventually does get a better job in better circumstances. They buy a foreclosed home because, of course, they shot these particular scenes during the post-2008 financial crisis, so there's that incorporation of the time frame. Like, that's the thing, is that even though there's never an explicit time frame really about what year or whatever this is, they do an amazing job at setting the scene by having specific songs, hairstyles, political events, things on the TV.
The fashion, the things they wear. So I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts about her second husband? Now, obviously, neither of us like this guy, but my read on this character, having, I think, known some guys like this, is that he's maybe, he is a drunk, and there's moments where he's like shitty to Mason, of course, because he's a stepdad. But my read on this second husband is that he does seem to want to be better. Like, obviously he's not the same as her first husband, who's or her second husband, who's hyper abusive. But how do you think the film wants us to interpret this second stepfather?
I think what the movie is trying to tell us explicitly is that he is a guy who is going through probably undiagnosed PTSD.
Yes.
And he is trying his best to cope. He's not doing a very good job, but I don't think the movie wants us to think he's like a bad guy. I think the movie is trying to make us see him as a guy who's trying to be better once again, but is somebody who was not able to get his shit together. Eventually his marriage falls apart. He's very much like Ethan Hawke, but didn't have the support system, is probably the best way I can put it.
So I had almost said he's like the genre of guy, and probably about the same age as Ethan Hawke, but he's like kind of a neocon. He graduated from high school and he enlisted because, like a lot of guys, we knew he was just like, well, of course I did that. That's what you do. And it wasn't even a political decision. It just was like, that was what an opportunity was for him. And that's that decision has now defined his life.
No, absolutely. Also, we talked about, obviously, the strife between her third husband in this movie and Mason, but there's that scene where they're, arguing after he comes home, high or drunk or whatever, maybe he just stayed out too late, and he's just like, so, where were you, bud? And he's like, just get off my fucking back, old man, or whatever, and then he gets up, and you can hear the rustling of the cans, so, he's been drinking a lot that fucking night.
So, that is one of my favorite scenes involving this character because the whole movie feels pretty real. I generally, in the Linklater I've seen, including Suburbia, which, I like a lot, I have issues with, some of his dialogue, some of his direction, the way he characterizes people. None of those issues are really in this movie. With this confrontation with his second stepfather, the interaction they have, his stepfather is being kind of a dick. Mason's also being, a little petulant in a pretty realistic way. And there's this really good shot of his stepfather after Mason goes back inside after their argument, sitting back down, where you kind of at least my read on that, when the camera kind of lingers on his stepfather sitting down and thinking, is he kind of knows he didn't handle that well.
No, totally. I definitely get that too. Like once again, obviously, in the tier of dads here, of course, Ethan Hawke's S tier here, and then this guy's like a
Yeah.
B minus C plus tier, and then of course Bill's F tier, obviously. This
Like,
guy, he's not a piece of shit, but he's clearly not handling his trauma very well.
this is probably the closest to my like fraternal experience in this character, I would say.
Yeah, same. I would say that my fraternal experience is probably a combination of this guy and Bill. I would say 75% Bill and 25% this guy, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But that's not
That-
here
that-
nor there. But yeah, so eventually we move on. Lorelai Linkletter's character goes off to college because she's, of course, a couple years older than Mason. Mason, he gets a girlfriend. He's finishing off his school. They have an unceremonious breakup because she's a whore. I'm kidding. They're both young. They're both young and stupid. Who cares?
It's time for them to break up.
Exactly. And then, they get their graduation party. They celebrate. All the other characters, not all the other characters, but many of the other characters from earlier in the film show up once again, which is cool that once again Richard Linklater was able to get these characters once again back after years of filming these scenes, from earlier, right? So it's cool that we get all these people basically back in. And of course, Patricia Arquette and Ethan Hawke, they age very well in this movie, but they age very realistically. Like, they don't look like they've had years of rich people, like rich celebrity plastic surgery or whatever. They look like well-aged, but still realistically aged characters. So I like that quite a bit. And then eventually Mason makes his way off to college. He meets a young lady at his first day of getting to the dorms. They go to like some nature area or whatever in like West Texas. And she has this very sort of early 2010 sort of twee line where she's like, it's not like, moments in life, they don't just happen to us. It's like we seize the moments. And the movie ends like that. But I totally forgot. I did want to mention just before they go off to college too, the scene that really broke me in this movie. And I know it's a scene, Brian, you're definitely aware of when I mentioned it earlier, was when Mason's moving out. At this point, Olivia, she's basically lost the house. She couldn't afford to keep it anymore. And of course, her third husband probably pissed away a lot of that money or just left, couldn't deal with it, whatever the fuck. And she has to move into this kind of dumpy little apartment. And as Mason's leaving, and this is a thing that happened to me in real life because I was the last one to leave the house. Because I know, Brian, you're the youngest, right, of your family too.
Yes.
So I was the last one to leave, of course. I actually left earlier than both of my siblings, which is funny. They left at 22 and I left at 21, but that's not here nor there. I won't brag about it. But I remember when I was leaving, coming down to Milwaukee, I left, I think it was July 2nd, and the night before I left was July 1st, of course. And me and my mom had gotten in an argument because I just wasn't packing as fastly as she wanted, and there was a lot of shit that still needed to be packed, and they had rented this fucking moving van or whatever. Yeah. And I remember, like, me and my mom had kind of an argument, and then she just went to the kitchen and she just started fucking crying. She started crying, and I realized why she was so frustrated is because she didn't want to see me leave. And like it was a really rough moment. And it was a very similar to this scene where she's just like, it seems like a lot of things just sort of happen to me. There's these sort of like milestones in life, and this happens and this happens and this happens, and I don't really get anything out of it essentially. And I'm basically just gonna die. Because like Olivia, even though she's accomplished a certain amount of things, like of course she got her degree and she helped raise her children and she's done this, but like still life is kind of passing her by. Like Ethan Hawke was able to get his shit together. He got married again, had another child, has a house and like a stable, whatever. And Olivia's just she's always there just kind of holding the bag.
Well, and that's the thing. It's not necessarily right that Olivia doesn't have her shit together. I think it's more like Ethan Hawke was a fuck up when he should have been being a dad during their formative years, right? So he had more time to get it together, right?
Yes.
Whereas Olivia didn't have the option. She had to take care of those kids whether she had it together or not, So she's like always playing catch up.
Yes, and even if she had one step forward, it was oftentimes two steps back, or two steps forward and one step back, and blah, blah. She just never had that ability to catch up the same way Ethan Hawke did. So seeing her arc in this movie was really devastating to me. As somebody who saw a lot of this character, like my mom was very much this person too. Although my mom did succeed, was able to, at least keep a house and wasn't evicted and all these things. But a lot of the things that she goes through in this movie were the same things that my mom went through. So it was really hard to watch her like fucking emotionally break down at the end, because once again I had that moment in real life and it was basically a very similar arc to what she had, so it was really fucking hard to watch when I first watched it.
Yeah, especially when they're very young and they're going through a lot of like financial turmoil. That stirred up a lot of feelings for me. I had this thought, and I think I was telling you, Taylor, this story about when I moved out of my mom's, and there was a period of time when I was saving up to move to Portland for like about a year. I actually moved back to my mom, preparing to move here, but that was a little different. The first time I moved out, I guess I was 20 2020. And my mom and I didn't actually talk about it that much. Like we talked about the logistics, but not about like our feelings about it. And then we were like driving somewhere and my mom wanted to play the song Independence Day by Bruce Springsteen. She played it like twice in a row and made me listen to it. And I remember when I moved out here, which is now coming up on 7 or 8 years. I remember when I left her house to go to Green Bay and then I was going to be there for a week before I flew out to the airport. And she said, "Oh, it's like you're leaving again. It's like you left home when you grew up and now you're leaving a second time, just farther away."
No, yeah, it's a lot. And that's the reason why this movie, I think, was so emotionally resonant to seemingly both of us, is that, like, this movie, once again, took place basically during our lifetimes. Of course, these characters are slightly younger than us, but still basically grew up in our same time frame. They watched the same shit. They went through the same, like, socio-political events. The parents in these movies were fairly similar to our parents and step-parents and all these things, right? So, in my opinion, even though I would not say this is my single favorite Linklater movie, I would say this is probably the most rewatchable one to me, even more so than I would say Before Sunrise. Like, this is just a fantastic movie. I fucking loved this movie.
Yeah, likewise, Taylor. It's not my favorite Linklater film. I think that'll probably always be Suburbia. That's just a type of movie with themes in it that really click for me. Although there is better, more consistent writing than Suburbia overall, and I think it is objectively probably his most successful film in terms of what it sets out to accomplish. The fact that he had such an ambitious idea, which is actually kind of alluded to in Before Sunrise. Ethan Hawke's character proposes an idea that is not dissimilar from this.
Honestly, that's kind of why I think Ethan Hawke's character is the same one in Before Sunrise, an alternate universe where there are no sequels.
Yeah, he's just constantly living this idea.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, this movie feels like a warm hug of a movie. That's what it feels like to me. This feels like a warm hug in like the best way possible. And this is, you know, we talked about, I think it was the Hot Couch Guy version of like a Lifetime movie. This feels like the Hot Couch Guy version of a Lifetime movie, to me at least.
I would say even more generous. This is like all of the feelings that Lifetime movies are infamous for, like very manipulatively evoking in their audience. This film is about kind of like organically and authentically bringing out of you, you know, by recognizing something in a pretty universal experience.
No, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. All right, so yes, that is the synopsis. And Brian, I have some Amazon reviews for us. Now, I didn't find many good 5-star ones because they were all super duper fucking long, but I found one good 5-star, but otherwise than that, most of these are negative reviews. Although I'm looking at some of these reviews and some of them are actually pissing me off, so I might not include all of them because some of these 1-star reviews are really hard. I'm going to be honest. They really piss me off. But the first 5-star review is, I would say, a good one. So Jamie Hovey gives us 5 stars. And the head of the review says, "This movie teaches us how to listen to each other." And the body of the review says, "This is a beautiful movie. It is very patient. The story unfolds without the gimmicks we have come to rely on in movies half as long. There is some domestic violence, which is pretty wrenching, but there are no preachy fables about the dangers of experimenting with alcohol, drugs, teen sex, laziness, or daydreaming. There's actually a little bit of that, but I don't mind it. It's fine. It's all pretty natural. Like, you know, once again, we talked about the scene where Mason Sr. talks about, you know, the birds and the bees talk or whatever, and it's awkward as shit.
Yeah.
that was an experience we all fucking had, and that's the dangers of fucking alcohol, drugs, and teen sex, essentially. So there is definitely some of that.
That's well, I mean, that's just kind of part of adolescence.
No, absolutely. Nothing bad happens when kids flirt with each other instead of being responsible at work. Nobody dies when boys drink beer in an abandoned house on a Saturday night. Going to church is not a sign of psychosis, neither is smoking pot. Learning to shoot a gun and learning to shoot a camera are just experiences that kids have in the course of growing up. Watching this movie, I became hyper-aware of my own pre-programmed jumpiness when predictable themes are introduced like guns or drugs. I can't remember the last time I watched a story unfold that didn't rely on predictable moral positions. The way the film makes you aware of your own programmed responses fits nicely with the boy Mason's skepticism about modern culture's automatonic tendencies. This film is about the beauty and sadness of life, its milestones, disappointments, and unexpected pleasures. Most of all, it is about the human connection, about filmmakers watching and listening in life as life unfolds around them, about parents and children learning to listen to each other, about how learning to really hear another human being is the best thing you can teach anyone. And honestly, I agree with pretty much the vast majority of this. I have heard, though, a lot of people have had the criticism where the fact that, once again, they say nothing happens, quote unquote. Like, they showed the scene where, we didn't mention it, but there's a scene where Mason and a couple of his, like, dumb fucking high school friends, like, partying in an abandoned house, and there was, like, a saw blade or whatever, and people are like, well, you think that the kid's gonna like fucking slice his head open on the saw or whatever, and it's gonna be
But
a
why would
moment.
that happen?
Yeah, why would that happen? There's nothing in this
We've
movie that would indicate that would happen. Like,
we have all done literally that scene. Also, by being distracted and think about that, the actual point of that scene, right, is that you're seeing these kind of awkward older guys who are like hanging out with them when they're younger, kind of bully and emasculate them while also like trying to impress them, which is a universal, like, I would say a universal like male experience, unfortunately.
yeah, exactly. Like, there's plenty of times where I've done dumb shit when I was younger and somebody did get hurt, sure. But it's not like those type of scenes where, like, you're playing in an abandoned house and somebody gets their fucking throat sliced open with a saw that's on the ground. That doesn't happen to the vast majority of people, and it's not that kind of fucking movie we're watching anyway.
It's just not that type of movie. That would fundamentally change what the point of the movie was.
It's like watching, I don't know, Michael Bay's The Rock and being mad that there's not a scene where a guy, like, pets his dog in it or something. It's like, it's not kind of movie.
There isn't a down-to-earth aside in Con Air where, you know, Cyrus the Virus is holding the bunny and thinking about how his mother gave him a bunny.
Yeah, exactly. And then our next review here is from MK Wolf, who gives us 4 stars. And the head of the review says, "This is an excellent movie, except for the totally unnecessary foul language," which was a thing that I saw many people complain about in the Amazon review. So one include one of them in here.
Is the language that like out of control for like a mainstream R-rated film?
No, it's not. And in fact, there's a scene where Lorelai Linkletter literally calls out Ethan Hawke, Mason Sr.'s character, for doing it. So it's a point of, like, there's like a moral condemnation, or at least a moment in the film where they're like, stop swearing.
Yeah, there's like an acknowledgement of it.
Word, but acknowledgement.
So,
yeah, so, but either way, finish this thought here. This is an excellent movie, except for the totally unnecessarily foul language in some parts of it. A little is okay, especially among awkward teenage boys who are trying to seem cool and macho. But when spouted on every serious occasion by the adults is off-putting. When is Hollywood going to wake up to the fact that F it and F you are no substitute for intelligent dialogue? It's debasing our culture. And first off, thank you very much, Maud
Bill
Flanders,
Cosby write this review?
Yeah, pull up your pants.
Yeah, what the fuck is this?
But also, it's one of those things where, once again, it's like, I think they're talking about the scenes where, like, the boys, once again, are talking about, like, in the abandoned house or whatever, and, you know, Ethan Hawke says the F word, you know, he just says fuck. I'm just going to say it, of course, obviously.
Well, they talk
I'm going to be
pussy.
real edgy and just say it. Talk about pussy or whatever, right? But, like, the thing is that, once again, that's pretty realistic. Like, teenage boys just fucking swear at each other all the time because they're trying to seem fucking cool. Like, a 14-year-old, they think the coolest thing is saying fuck and goddamn it and shit and motherfucker. Like,
fuck you, you fuckhead.
Yeah, it's fine. Like, if anybody's getting mad about that, it's not like, I don't know, in South Park when they did it just to see if they could get away with it, which I don't even have a problem with. But they're not doing it to see if they can get away with it. It's just, I would say, actually pretty realistic young people dialogue. It's fine.
It would be funny if in this naturalistic film there was like Tarantino-esque, like really like overly verbose swearing.
Yeah. There's a scene where Mason just has his, like, N-word moment.
Oh, yeah. Does I have 5 minutes? Oh, I'm imagining it now.
Oh, God. I don't know. We should stop talking about this before we get canceled, Brian.
This is what they took from you.
Yeah, right? And our next review here is from Toddsta, who gives us 2 stars. And the head of the review says, "Spoiled meat gray kind of depressing movie. It will bring you down. Not my idea of entertainment."
I don't think this is a depressing movie. There's sad stuff in it, but I think it's a pretty nice film.
I don't agree with that either, but the body of the review says, "Watch this movie if you feel like immersing yourself into a depressive state. The only interesting facet of this movie is that it was literally filmed over several years, which lets you see the actors age naturally. But the storyline is a downer." I also don't agree with that either. It's just a story about kids growing up. It's not that depressing. I don't think it's depressing at all.
Yeah, it's actually kind of affirming most of the time.
No, absolutely. Oh, this is the review I wanted to highlight because this is so funny. I totally forgot. This is the one I wanted to highlight. It's so good. "Characters are mostly lifeless, and it focuses on the negative aspects of dysfunctional families that wonder why their lives are a mess." What? Oh, and by the way,
whoa! We are getting who wonder why their lives are a mess. We're getting from that little phrase some insight into this fucking reviewer. They're like, oh, another film about a dysfunctional family and all their problems. Spare me.
Oh, by the way,
How
Brian, this last sentence is even better. And this, you talk about the insight, there's even more insight. Just get ready for this.
Oh my God.
"It mocks the notion of God and is basically a liberal pro-Obama movie, which literally makes a point of touting His Highness while bashing George Bush."
I mean, like, you could be critical of their dad because he's like a hot couch guy and kind of a dirtbag. It does bash George Bush. It's awesome. When does it say anything bad about God or religion?
maybe saying F words, I guess. That's the
Yeah,
closest thing I could think.
I mean, like, look, I mean, if that's, I'm gonna say this is like, obviously Linklater is a big lib, and I think it's probably the coolest thing about him is that he is one of the last base libs of Hollywood. As far as like, I've still got alarm bells going off from this guy saying dysfunctional families who wonder why their lives is a mess. It's just really showing your true colors with that little sentence.
No, absolutely. Jesus Christ. And the last sentence is, so the Michael Moore brainless crowd will probably like it.
When was this written? When was this fucking review written?
Most of them were written around when the movie came out,
Time
like
it came out,
2014, 2015.
which, like, Michael Moore was not obscure in the mid 2010s, but he certainly wasn't, I think, the first person you think of when you think of, like, libs anymore, right?
Not really, no. I would have guessed maybe somewhere more like fucking Lena Dunham or some shit.
Yeah. I mean, like, there is stuff with their dad being, like, a base lib, but that's not, like, I don't know. I guess, actually, that is kind of the point of the movie, is that it's about this dysfunctional family who are, you know, kind of going through, like, you could read this, I guess, as, like, a quote-unquote liberal or progressive film. I wouldn't necessarily. This person has some real hang-ups about seeing poor people on screen, I think.
Yeah, did Tucker Carlson fucking write this review or something?
This is like one of the people that you'll see in Portland. Like, you know, I work in downtown Portland, and sometimes you'll see people looking at this store at like a dirty homeless person, someone talking to themselves, someone doing drugs, and they'll just go, "That's so sad. That's so sad," as they gawk at these people. And what they're thinking is, it's sad for me that I have to see that they live this way.
Exactly. So yeah, Mr. or Miss Todsta, go fuck yourself. You seem like an asshole. You seem like a miserable asshole. You talk about how this movie's miserable and depressing. You're miserable and depressing.
Yeah, this person's a fucking miserable piece of shit.
Definitely projection. I'll say that.
Yeah, well, this is one of those things you see this with the review segment on the show sometimes. I liked this movie. Obviously, I think I made that clear. I've enjoyed this movie. I don't like super duper with all my heart love it, but I read a review like this, and then I think maybe I do love it because I'm so mad at this stupid review. Like, it puts you in a position where you have to defend it way harder than you want to because people are being so incendiary and stupid in their criticisms.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, speaking of another one, Brian, I had 5 reviews here. I'm not going to highlight the last one because it's just so, like, heinous. But the last one that I want to highlight on here, it's really bad, I'm going to be honest. But the last review I actually want to highlight here is from Linus. And I don't think it's Linus Tech Tips because he seems like a nicer person than this person. But I could be wrong about it. But either way, Linus gives this 1 star. And the head of the review says, the very worst movie in history, which, no.
Awesome. I got to say, it takes courage to make a stand like this. Oh, go on. This is the rules. I like this guy.
Yeah. So the body of the review says, if I set out to write and film the worst movie in history, I could not come to what this monumental piece of garbage has achieved. I felt for the glowing reviews by most quote-unquote film critics. Should have known better. The acting is horrible, which I don't agree. Actually, the acting's pretty good in this movie. The plot does not exist. That's also not true. And the film is interwoven throughout with piles of subliminal Hollywood leftist innuendo.
Ah, yes. Okay, this is so awesome. Because he's like, oh, there's subliminal brainwashing. No, they literally just have a cool guy tell you that Obama's cool and Bush sucks.
Yeah.
These fucking transvestigators, they see a guy saying, I love to vote for Obama and I hate the war in Iraq, and they go, trying to brainwash me with their subliminal advertising, but it won't work on me. I'm too smart. I recognize that this is political.
Yeah. Last 2 paragraphs here. Watching the film made me physically ill. What a complete waste of time. Perhaps this director can make his next movie about quote-unquote hope and change, or what a great mayor of New York, Mr. Stalin de Blasio has been.
Stalin de Blasio! We love it! No, okay, so, and you know, I think anyone that knows us, right, no, it's like, we don't like Obama here, right? This is not like a pro-Obama podcast, but it's so funny that, like, to these people, and again, having lived through, like, the Tea Party movement, having a character that mentions that Obama exists sets them off. And there is so much that happens in this movie. There is so much that is, like, has a strong emotional core that has nothing to do with politics. But the fact that someone says, like, in a scene that takes place in 2008, goes like, oh, I'm gonna vote for Obama, makes them just think, like, oh, another communist propaganda film. That's all they can think of as they watch any other scene in this movie. Any other scenes that take place after that. The scene of Mason with his girlfriend breaking up, any of these things, and they just think, oh, this is about Obama. Obama made this movie. You know, and the thing is, we now know that the Obamas, that they do produce films, and they're not as good as this, so...
Although, to be fair, I forgot to include this in the trivia, but Obama did include this on his best of when this movie came out.
That is awesome that he did that, and he was like, "Yeah, I love that they mentioned me. I love that they said I was cool."
Yeah. Let me be clear. I love it when they stole McCain's signs because he deserved to be tortured in Vietnam.
Can you imagine, though, if he had just said that he liked it? He's like, I actually did that.
Yeah.
I personally did that.
If you like your John McCain sign, you can't keep it. All right, but yeah, so that is all the reviews I want to highlight, because once again, the last one is just so, it's like more of a shitty troll review, so I don't even want to highlight it. But either way, those are our Amazon reviews. Now, before we get to our pluggables, once again, I'm just going to basically reiterate our final thoughts before we got to the Amazon reviews. Once again, I love this movie. I think it's great. I think it's relevant to both Brian and I's upbringing, because it was once again filmed basically in the time we fucking grew up. And I like the performances. I think it's, a very daunting film, or the daunting premise and like idea of making the film, and they succeeded pretty much entirely. I think the characters are likable. Not always, of course. Once again, Mason can be kind of a dickhead sometimes. Mason Sr. or Jr. can be kind of a dickhead sometimes, but he's also a boy growing up in a kind of a crappy situation where a lot of these things are kind of foisted upon him, essentially.
He's moody. He's moody sometimes.
Although he does have that amazing line. It was like, well, he likes bright eyes, so he can't be that bad. Which
yeah,
is
that's
awesome
cute. That's a very elder millennial thing to say.
Yeah. But yeah, either way, I love this movie. Once again, it's like a warm hug. It warms my heart every time I watch it. And I'm glad that the movie didn't end with, once again, some tragic thing where I know everybody wanted Mason to get like shot in the head at the fucking end of the movie or whatever.
Hack. That would be so hack. Like
hack garbage. They want this to be like fucking Bridge to Terabithia, where it's like a beautiful like kids movie, and then at the end, like the fucking female like child love interest of the main character dies at the end for no reason.
The original ending of Clerks.
Yeah, really. Which I believe we did mention on the Suburbia episode, but Clerks was directly a response to Richard Linklater's Slacker, which a lot of people don't know.
Oh, that's right.
So but yeah, once again,
Linklater's influence oozes out into the culture.
Absolutely. But yeah, I would absolutely 100% recommend this movie, like with no reservations, especially if you're a fan of Richard Linklater or you just like the concept of the movie. I would 100% recommend it. I got my Blu-ray copy at the fucking Dollar Tree. That's how easy it is to find this fucking movie. So just watch it, pay a couple bucks for it, whatever, rent it on Amazon or watch it on Netflix, whatever. But I would 100% recommend this. And I would say this is probably the most accessible Richard Linklater movie we've watched. I will say that too.
So I think I agree with that. As far as my thoughts overall, if you like film, you should probably see this film. It's not a movie I would think to put on all the time, but it's just on a technical level. And that's aside from the emotionally resonant stuff that is like I personally can connect to or whatever. On a technical level, the way that it was made and how successfully and seamlessly they do that is pretty remarkable. In regards to Linklater, I would say this is probably, I know he's continued making films. I don't want to make it sound like he retired after this, but this is like maturation of all of the themes that we've seen in Suburbia, that you see in Dazed and Confused, that you see in Slacker, that you see in, at least in Before Sunrise, and probably in the sequels. All of these themes he's been grappling with. And, we talk about him as, a pivotal Gen X director, although, he's 1960, but whatever. For our purposes, he is absolutely Gen X, and for his ethos and aesthetic. But this is almost like him looking backwards at those themes as he's getting older, looking at a younger generation and seeing how much they're like he was, right? And seeing what they're going through. There is a strong backdrop of of course, post 9/11, and then even stronger, post financial crisis 2008. But it's about him getting older and looking back and saying oh, this is what it would be like to just grow up in this time. Here are these universal experiences that are still happening and that, still connect with these themes and these ideas that I've been grappling with, I assume throughout my career if I'm Linklater. It's very good. Probably the most well-made film he's made, even if it isn't my personal favorite.
No, I would 100% agree with that. Yeah, I have seen, I think, probably about half of Linklater's movies, and I would agree. Even though the budget of this is, once again, we talked about fairly low, but of course, this movie was metered out over not many days and over a long period of time, so that's probably why the budget was significantly lower. But once again, for a $4 million movie, this is like a very fucking well-made movie, because as we've always talked about on the show, especially when it comes to Marvel movies and shit, that have $200 million budgets and look like fucking shit, and the writing's garbage and acting's terrible and everything sucks about them. But the fact that a nearly 3-hour-long movie with Academy Award nominated and winning actors, and once again, highly regarded and highly paid actors. In fact, I watched a short recently, Brian. I didn't even know about this until fairly recently. But Independence Day, of course, Will Smith was famously the lead actor in that movie. It was originally going going to be Ethan Hawke. Like, Ethan Hawke was a
I could
big
see that.
fucking deal. I read that I saw apparently that he read the script and he's like, what the fuck is this garbage? And he apparently threw it out the window as he was on a road trip or something, the script of it, which is hilarious.
Aw, we love him. We love him.
I mean, Roland Emmerich is maybe one of the least depraved German directors. So I'll say that. Not a good director.
One of the least depraved Germans, even.
Yeah, it's like there's like a fucking like spectrum. Like Werner Herzog is on the way deranged side. Uwe Ball's like right next to him, and then fucking Roland Emmerich is way on like the chiller side.
And then at the very end of the chill side is Hitler.
No, I'm sorry, Goebbels, because Goebbels was the one who was the film guy.
Yep.
God, who's another? I'm trying to think of like unchill German. I mean, there's so many unchill German directors. I feel like that's like the kind of. Oh, even though he's Austrian, Michel Haneke, he's very deranged.
What did he do again? What did he do?
He did like Funny Games and stuff like that.
Oh, so I'm going to say something. I like Funny Games a lot, and I know you don't. I'm interested. I kind of want to talk about it someday. Another friend of mine hates that movie, and you both have very good reasons for why you don't like it. I saw another movie by him, and I hated it. Was it like the fucking piano teacher or something?
Maybe something. I know about that movie, and I think The Lives of Other People is another famous movie of his.
Yeah, I liked Funny Games, and then I saw another film by him, and it was so bad that it made me rethink liking Funny Games.
And also, I am looking it up. He was born in Germany, but he was raised in Austria. So close enough. That's about as close as we're going to get. Although, going to Austria in like the next month and a half, I do want to obviously meter my saying that Austrians are Germans, because I know they're going to fucking shit on me if I make a mistake on that. Just don't bring up the Anschluss. Never bring up the Anschluss. I know we have a congressman named Jake Anschluss. I'm just kidding. That's not his actual name, but his name's like Jacob Auchenschloss. And it's like, oh, isn't that the thing that fucking Austria did when they combined with Germany?
Oh.
Chapo made that joke already, but when I first heard it, I'm like, yeah, that's just, his name's Jacob Anschluss.
You gotta, when you walk around Austria telling people that, they'll love it.
All right, so yes, that is our review of Boyhood. So let's get into our pluggables here. So once again, you can follow me at Carlos Chantor on Twitter.com. And as well, please subscribe and follow us on both our YouTube and our Spotify channel, where we are uploading every episode simultaneously to both platforms. And as well as always, please donate to the Lucifer and the Father campaign. Of course, our good friends Scott, Sean, Robert are creating a fantastic series. They need more moral and financial support to get their series off the ground. Last time I checked, they're about 25% towards their goal as of recording this episode. So they're getting there slowly but surely, but they still need more of our support to get there. And as well as always, our promise to you is that if you donate to the campaign, just send us an email, send us a YouTube comment, do whatever, and just show us that you donated to the campaign, and we will, within reason, match your donation up to about $25. Reasonable, of course. So please help us get Scott, Sean, and Robert's dream show become a reality. And of course, the next one, of course, as always, we just talked about in the very beginning of this episode, but the now official Luigi Mangione Defense Fund is up and running. Of course, we believe in Luigi. We know he is, at the very moment, not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. We believe in Luigi. And if you donate to that campaign as well, we will, within reason, match that donation. Once again, just send us a YouTube comment, send us an email, do whatever. But at the moment, that campaign is going very well. I think it's got like $750,000 at the moment. So people are very much believing in the Luigi Mangione Defense Fund. So we have to stay on that. And as well, a brand new one as of this episode, and we'll put it in the rest of the episodes from now on. But we have now hit over 100 subscribers on YouTube, so we are creating a Patreon page.
Been a long time coming. It's pretty exciting. You know, we have things on the pipeline that we've been brainstorming for a while now. But yeah, we are at 101 now. I think we just hit, what are we at, about 2 years in?
Yeah, we're about almost 2.5 years in. So it's been a while. It's amazing. Two and a half years. Jesus Christ. It's been a while since we started the pod. And we talked about stuff.
If you guys get us to 500, we will sing stain songs to each other.
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. And we will put some Patreon goals in there. We're still working on it, but at the moment I have 3 in mind. Of course, Brian and I will brainstorm them. But as of this episode, we will put the link to our Patreon in the description. Of course, it is not a have-to listen to our show, but if you do decide to support us, of course, we do this for free. So if you want to support us and give us a couple bucks every month, feel free to. But I was sort of personally thinking like a $1 and like $5 tier, I think is totally fair. Yeah, I think those are totally reasonable asks.
Exactly. I feel like for my thinking at least, is so we're going to do the show as we have been regardless. We're going to do it indefinitely. We're going to refine it more. We have plans for that. And we're just going to, we've gotten, I think, like, I'm pretty happy with the show we have now after this time. But having the Patreon tier, it kind of, for me, it would incentivize me to do, like, we've talked about doing supplemental material, kind of more expansive material, more niche material, and having a Patreon, and having some subscribers for me would incentivize me to, kind of put more into that in addition to our regular weekly show, which I guess for me, that's what's most exciting about it, the prospect of it.
Absolutely. And yeah, once again, to be clear, this is not saying that we are going to a Patreon only show where we're going to have episodes like locked necessarily behind content, but it is supplemental material. We will still work on making 2 to 4 episodes a month, depending on what we're doing in our lives or whatever. But we are essentially making a free product. So if you want to support our show, feel free to. And also as well, I was thinking even before Brian and I make official tiers, I do want to also say that I would hope that if you're going to, donate a lot of money to our show every month, we would like to donate some of that money back to Scott, Sean, and Robert and Luigi at the same time. So we will help out our friends and Luigi, who eventually we will have Luigi on the show, I feel. We will have to. We have to at some point.
And circling back, Sean, Scott, and Robert, it feels like, they have made, like you said, about 25% of their goal. And like you said, slowly but surely they're plugging away. Because there are times when, we would talk about it every week and you'd be like, well, is it building up? But then I checked recently, I actually checked last week because I saw a post that Scott had made and it reminded me to check. And yeah, they are plugging away and raising that money. And again, I would say to any listeners of the show, please throw them a few bucks so we can match it. Because, they've been great friends of ours, kind of some of the only friends of the show really so far, other than like Bill Cosby and R. Kelly and all my friends. But please go again on YouTube, check out the Lucifer and the Father pilot, because I feel like I really can't overstate. If you haven't seen it, it's a lot more ambitious than you're thinking. I know I say this every week, but it's kind of like a play. It's very intriguing, and they have some pretty big ideas for that series, and they're only going to be able to do that with our help and with your help. And so, we talk every week about how hard it is for independent artists, how the film industry, the television industry, the music industry is stacked against like independent artists because they're all stuck in this late capitalism content creation loop. And this is a way you can help some pretty ambitious artists who are working very outside of the traditional Hollywood market to make a pretty cool show.
Exactly. And even before we get to your pluggables, Brian, I have one more thing to add. So, of course, I failed to mention this, but we will, of course, always put the link for the first episode of Lucifer and the Father in the description, as we've always had. And, you talked about, obviously, how difficult it is for small artists. If Bong Joon-ho is having a hard time getting his newest released movie to even break even at the box office, a guy who has won Best Picture, imagine how hard it is for Scott, Sean, and Robert to get their fucking project off the ground. Like, seriously. Like, the entire film and TV market is a clusterfuck right now. COVID destroyed the theater system, basically, just by itself.
And one of the things, too, that I feel like Scott has alluded to in our conversation, I don't think I'm saying anything he wouldn't want to say here, is like part of the reason I think that it's been hard for them to secure that funding for Lucifer and the Father, because, they're in faith-based programming and faith-based media, and there is a pretty big built-in audience there, but I think because their idea for Lucifer and the Father is more ambitious, people, even in that community, seem a little bit more... I feel like I recall him telling me this. People were kind of reticent to give it that funding because they have these big ideas that are kind of unusual for the market there. Speaking for myself, and I'm sure for Taylor too, that's the type of media, not because it's faith-based necessarily, but just in terms of its ambition and trying to do it independently. That's the type of thing I would feel very happy with supporting as an art review-based program.
No, abso-fucking-lutely. And then, Brian, of course, you have your pluggables as well?
Yeah, follow Millennials Our Old Pod on Instagram and Threads, all one word. Again, that is the most optimal way to harass me. If you are really mad that I hated Before Sunrise, if you're really, really mad that, what's the thing that I like, that Brad Bird movie, the Ayn Rand movie, I don't really like it, but I'm going to pretend I do to be a heel now. Reach out, tell me to KYS on Instagram or Threads at the Millennials Are Old Pod account. You can also follow Millennials Are Old on Facebook. Great way to send us suggestions. If you find some cringe millennial content, some cringe Zoomer or Gen X content, if you want to be on the podcast, actually come on and slide into the show's DMs and bully me and we'll work something out. Maybe we can come up with some sort of bribe and I can get you on here. As well, you can follow my personal account on Instagram, JLO Biafra, JLO Biafra. Do I have any other plugs? I think it's just those two.
Yeah, I think so. And I will say, maybe as a joke, we'll have a Patreon tier where if you give us $100, you could be on the show or some shit. And if somebody actually does do that, we will give you a full fucking episode. You will have
we would let
you would hours of our time.
No, okay. So for real, it would be pretty open just because I think it'd be fun to have different guests on. If you donate money to the Patreon, if you donate like $50 to $100, we would give you like carte blanche of the show. You would pick a subject and we would be like deferent within reason. I would, at least. If you had a subject you really wanted to come on here and rave about, we would make it like coast to coast AM. Just give you the mic and let you rave about whatever dumb bullshit you wanted.
Exactly. But yeah, so we will be launching the Patreon in a little bit. We will, of course, be putting it in this episode and future episodes from here on in, but we still got to work things out. But either way, we are very excited because we want your money. I'm just kidding, obviously, but if you want to support the show, feel free to. All right, so yes, that is our review here. So, speaking of Boyhood, Brian, I'm feeling tired and like a little boy, like a little baby boy. I need to get my nappy time. So, Brian, let's heat up some milk, put it in the microwave, and let's start sucking on our thumbs and start drinking warm milk to go to sleep.
Yep. Tightening my bonnet around my head right now.
Yeah, my binky. I'm wearing that onesie with like the ass flap, the button ass flap.
with one of the buttons is down.
Whatever happened to those? That must have been like a boomer kid thing.
Yeah, it definitely was. Definitely.
I also just the ass flap one because listen, okay, I'm not gonna get into too much of the biological stuff, but if you have to shit, you usually have to piss at the same time too. So you're just
I know that's what I was thinking too. Yeah, that's what I think too. Whenever I take a dump, I pee a little bit, at least a little bit.
Yeah. Brian, that's just because you're old millennials now, so we can't hold it in, as Tom Myers would say.
Oh my God.
One more year and you gotta you can't hold your piss anymore. And it's like, dude, you're 27. That's not a 27-year-old problem. It's because your body
alarming.
sucks.
You should probably get some tests run.
Yeah. All right. But yeah, speaking of babies and people who look like babies, Tom Myers, of course. So you, I, and Tom Myers need to go to sleep. So have a good night, everybody. Sleep tight. And if you're having issues reliving your childhood, watch this movie. Have a good night, everybody. Sleep tight. And we'll see you on the flip side. See you next episode.